The UK's Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned after just 6 weeks in office, leaving behind a divided Conservative Party and calls for a general election.
Civilians in Kyiv forced to take cover as Russian drone strikes continue on the Ukrainian capital.
Italy's president begins consultations with political leaders in the hopes of quickly forming a new government after the far right swept last month's elections.
The UK's Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned after 6 weeks in office, making her the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history. The move comes after a growing number of her own lawmakers called for Truss to step down.
Office at a time of great economic and international instability.
The rebellion was sparked by her now-binned economic plan that caused financial turmoil, and the resignation of both her finance minister and home secretary within less than a week of each other.
Threatens the security of our whole continent.
Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has immediately called for a general election, calls echoed by the Liberal Democrats and Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland. If their calls are successful, an election would bring trouble for the Tory party, as opinion polls suggest that the Labour Party has a growing lead.
A low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver.
Before stepping down, Truss spoke to King Charles III to tender her resignation.
I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. Thank you.
She will remain in the role for another week until her party chooses her replacement.
Russian authorities are likely setting information conditions to justify blunt Russian retreats and significant territorial losses in Kherson region, says the Institute for the Study of War. The UK Defence Ministry adds that Russia's recent admission that a, quote, difficult situation has emerged in the Kherson region is highly unusual and likely indicates that the authorities are considering a major withdrawal of their forces from the area west of Dnipro River. Now, the Moscow-installed head of the key southern city, Vladimir Salter, spoke of plans to move up to 60,000 people across the Dnipro River and into Russia over the next 6 days, at a rate of 10,000 people each day, in what the Institute for the Study of War calls the guise of civilian, quote, evacuation as a cover for the mass forced removal of civilians from Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. The think tank says in an attempt to mitigate the informational and operational consequences of failing to defend against another successful Ukrainian advance, Russian forces are also setting information conditions to conduct a false flag attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectrical power plant. Now, Russian authorities likely intend these warnings about a purported Ukrainian strike on the Kakhovka plant to set information conditions for Russian forces to damage the dam and blame Ukraine for the subsequent damage and loss of life, all while using the resulting floods to cover their own retreat further south into Kherson region. But the UK Defence Ministry, in its intelligence update, says that with all the permanent bridges severely damaged, Russia would highly likely rely heavily on a temporary barge bridge it completed near Kherson in recent days and military pontoon ferry units which continue to operate at several locations. A key challenge of any Russian withdrawal operation would be extracting troops and their equipment across a 1,000 meters wide river in good order, as on this photo showing Russian forces operating pontoon ferry near the Nova Kakhovka Dam.
There's been no let-up in the bombardment by Russian missiles and so-called kamikaze drones on Ukrainian cities. Residents take cover where they can, and in the capital Kyiv, it's in underpasses.
There's an air raid now, and according to the rules of the company I work for, they said to go down for safety, and we've been sitting here for about 3 hours.
In fact, it's not as scary as it was in February. In fact, the more these kamikaze drones, the more missiles are launched, the more I just get angry.
But there's little doubt of the destruction the drones leave behind. The Ukrainian military say they're managing to intercept many, but with Ukraine's critical energy infrastructure taking a pounding, Moscow has attracted international condemnation. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, has called Russia's strikes acts of pure terror that amount to war crimes.
Targeted attacks on civilian infrastructure with the clear aim to cut off men, women, children of water, electricity and heating, with the winter coming, these are acts of pure terror, and we have to call it as such.
The EU plans to impose sanctions on 3 senior Iranian military commanders and the company that develops the drones. The move indicates EU ministers do not believe Iran's denials that it has supplied Russia with the low-flying lethal weapons. At a closed UN Security Council session, Russia and Iran's representatives denied the use of Iranian-made drones in the war in Ukraine.
Italian President Sergio Mattarella began formal consultations with political leaders Thursday, hoping to quickly deliver Italy's first government led by the far right since the end of the Second World War. The talks began with the new head of the Senate, Ignazio La Russa, who's part of the Brothers of Italy party. The far-right party, with roots in neo-fascism, won the most votes in last month's general election. The Speaker of Italy's lower house came next. Lorenzo Fontana is a prominent figure in the anti-immigration Lega party, led by Matteo Salvini. La Lega is expected to be a junior coalition partner, alongside Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia. But much depends on Giorgia Meloni. The leader of the Brothers of Italy will meet Mattarella on Friday. The presumed premier-to-be must find a way to manage the egos in her fractious coalition, which is already showing cracks. Meloni has already rebuked Berlusconi for recent controversial pro-Russia statements, adding that all members of her government must be on board with the EU and NATO.
And I want to come to the government's response after that as well.
UK MP Ian Duncan-Smith says the British government should expel Chinese diplomats if they were involved in an attack on a Hong Kong protester who says he was beaten inside the compound of the Chinese consulate in Manchester.
As I said, the government must say categorically anybody involved in those scenes is not welcome here. If it's the consul themselves, they must go. And they should have hauled the ambassador, and that's the key thing. Haul the ambassador and tell the ambassador we want a full apology. And these people are persona non grata, they're going home. And we'll never tolerate that on British soil.
Protester Bob Chan backed the call for action.
It's very disturbing. This incident reflects that Chinese consulate staff have totally no regard for the law. I believe the UK is a very safe place with freedom of speech. That consulate staff can so brazenly pull someone inside and beat them up in broad daylight is unimaginable. It's shocking, and this shouldn't happen.
Amateur footage of the protest shows Bob Chan on the ground inside the Chinese consulate, being beaten by consulate staff. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs claims a protester was there illegally and had, quote, jeopardized the security of the Chinese diplomatic premises.
After 12 years of waiting, the time has almost come for Qatar to host the FIFA World Cup. 800 players from 32 nations will be taking part in football's biggest competition for the first of its kind on the continent. It'll also be the first ever Winter World Cup. Temperatures here at the moment around about 30 degrees Celsius. We're expecting them to drop to around 24, 25 in the day next month and around 17 or 18 Celsius in the evening. Although incidentally, the majority of stadiums here in Qatar do have inbuilt air conditioning for both players and fans alike. There is so much excitement, so much anticipation here in Qatar, as you would imagine, ahead of the World Cup. In fact, I spoke to the FIFA president Gianni Infantino earlier this year. He promised me it will be the best World Cup ever. Qatar host Ecuador on November the 20th. The final will then take place in Lusail on the national day of December the 18th.
NASA's James Webb Space Telescope has captured a lush, highly detailed photo of the iconic Pillars of Creation, where new stars are forming within dense clouds of gas and dust. The US Space Agency says the new picture of the nebula, which was originally captured by the Hubble Space Telescope in 1995, will further help scientists understand how stars are created.